Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We are, of course, going back to the JRC, but before we do, the usual disclaimers and a bit of an update on the lives that I'm just going to do directly on this video. I know I haven't done a live in a very long time. But folks, what's going on here is current politics is making my head spin. Okay, like I have things changing constantly, both on a state and federal level. In particular, the debate out here in regards to the sheltered workshops and sub-minimum wage, because with MAGA taking over everything, that's up for grabs. There's unsure footing. We don't know where we stand. We don't know where things lie. And now we have the federal government that is, putting SNAP, FAFSA, and everything on hold. That's just for that portion of it. Now, with the JRC, in between RFK's, we curse on this channel, batshit insanity, and him still being, as far as I know, the guy they want to put ahead of Health and Human Services, including the CDC and the FDA, is now kind of unsure. I don't know what's going on because we also have President Cheeto talking about AI vaccines. Everything's up in the air. It's not just changing by the day, it's literally changing by the hour. It's been very difficult to keep up with all of it. So, to be perfectly honest, until I start knowing where the hell things actually stand, until the dust finally settles down at least a little bit so I can understand what next steps are going to be, and I actually have some real concrete up to date news as to what's going on. I'm not going to be doing a live until then because doing these videos on top of trying to keep track of everything, on top of setting up new dentists so I can finally cover my front teeth, cover my own ass in, real life job situations. I'm doing remarkably well. Nobody panic, but I am bored out of my goddamn mind. I just want to get these front teeth fixed. So, get that situation handled so I'm no longer bored to tears, because it's not a good place to be for me, folks. Boredom leads to depression, believe it or not. Right? So, I gotta wait for the dust to settle. Big right now. I literally gotta wait for the dust to settle. So, by the time we finally go back live again, I can give you guys some actual concrete information. I don't feel comfortable with doing it right now because things are developing and changing so quickly. Okay? Alright, now that that's out of the way, if you're unfamiliar with the Stop the Shocks campaign or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, pertinent links are right there in the description box, including Autistic Hoya's massive archive on the subject, literally where we get 99.9% of our receipts when it comes to the topic of the JRC. We have linked in there the article written by Neuroclastic, where they interviewed over 800 ABA professionals in regards to the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center's so-called behavior modification program. Remember, this is an article that got so deep underneath their skin that they felt the need to threaten Neuroclastic with a defamation lawsuit. Usually, when a place that seems to operate as being above the law gets that frightened because of a small and just starting advocacy group puts out an article like this, it is worth pondering. It's worth delving in deep. So please read that article, share it on all your social media. We've got their GoFundMe linked up in there too, because unlike the JRC, we do not have access to unlimited funding. All right, now to the trigger warnings. When we discuss places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center or Agape Boarding School for Boys, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips or surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. If you do got young children present, make sure to use the headphones. Also, obviously, this channel is marked not for kids for a reason. We do use profanity and speak on dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and they are watching this, parental supervision is advised. And because everybody's talking about it, like it was the royal soap opera that I never asked to learn about either, regards to the Blake Justin Guy saga. No, I'm not going to be covering it. It is not my three-winged circus, folks. Okay? I've got way too much going on the advocacy front right now to be trying to take my eyes off and dealing with whatever the hell that is. Hopefully, things work well for the person they're supposed to work well for. I know that sounds wish-washy, but in honesty, I just simply do not have the time to dedicate to studying that particular case and developed a well-informed and educated opinion on the matter. I tend to avoid whatever is going on in celebrity world like the plague unless it's a situation that can't be avoided, where one of my own, who just happens to work in Hollywood, is getting demonized and dragged through the mud. Okay? I always stand for my own. For my own, I will always make time. In a situation like this, you see where I'm going. I'm going to stop digging the hole, alright? Because I don't feel like it's stopping this video and starting again. Holy crap, my head is spinning, folks. Head is spinning. Right. Speaking of, we do use profanity and speak on dark subjects. If your child's 16 and younger, watching, parental supervision is advised, alright? Okay, we're gonna read a little bit more this time, because I did a little bit of pre-reading. And as per usual, I'm gonna do that one thing that JRC hates me the most for, which is to use, both as someone who's worked in the field as well as someone who's been through the service system myself, I'm going to use that knowledge and experience to point out every single elephant in the room that they don't want you to notice, and that you wouldn't notice necessarily as somebody just coming into this. So, let's go back here. This regression led to RM being strapped to a bed with posy straps in isolation. He lost weight and engaged in SIBs he had not exhibited before, including biting his own legs. So how many times have I told you guys exactly how, specifically in my own life experience, how trauma affected me? Right? When a person experiences trauma and they are neurodivergent, when you have gotten out of that traumatic situation and the dam bursts with all these suppressed emotions, anger, rage, pain, suffering, self-loathing, it's an endless list. that tends to push on what we are. We are autistic. We are going to react in regards to trauma as an autistic. Generally, what that looks like is the previously known so-called problematic behaviors are not just going to return, they're going to return with a vengeance. They are going to be more frequent, more intense, and no, folks, we do not have the slightest bit of control over it. Okay? Another thing that trauma does is all of a sudden, behavioral issues that were never there before make an appearance. Now, those of us who have worked in this field tend to understand that if you go through trauma and after getting out of that violent situation, you begin to process all the shit that has been suppressed and held back and hidden by a mask all at once. There's another thing that happens. I don't know how to properly put it in words, but there is an enormous amount of pressure. There is a massive amount of mental, physical, and emotional energy that goes into holding up our masks while suppressing all that baggage and keeping it in check, especially when you have to do it for years with no break. Okay? When you get out of that situation and you no longer have to do that, and the dam busts, it has an immense psychological impact. What that often looks like for people like me is what I told you about. It was complete, utter shutdown. It was losing skills that previously I had mastered and been doing for years. For years. It was behavioral issues I never had before. In particular, in regards to anger management, the way I became and still am incredibly aggressive in some areas. It was, yeah. I had never really been aggressive before. Okay? I was definitely not known for blowing up and losing my temper or having rage issues. Okay? In regards to losing weight, again, that is the physical part of the psychological toll. It affects everything. Everything. And we are going to respond to that very psychological event as an autistic person who's gone through that type of thing is going to deal with it. So behavioral problems that were already known, but that you had gotten down to a bare minimum by using the punishment system of treatment instead of dealing with the triggers. Well, if there's no threat anymore and the dam busts, those behaviors are going to come back, make themselves become known, and now because we have psychological damage to add on to it, they're going to become more frequent. And because of the psychological toll of when that dam busts, we're not going to be able to maintain the same level of control in regards to those behaviors that maybe we exhibited while we were doing so under threat and duress. Okay? As far as new behaviors, like biting yourself, things of that nature, doing things you know are actually self-destructive. And believe me when I say we know, I mean we know as in sometimes we have literally looked that shit up and read the information. Like me, when my dad died and I decided to become a raging out of control alcoholic. 6 years going on 7 sober. There's a toll. That kind of level of such a massive psychological event, such as letting all that pent up stuff that's been held back and shut away and undealt with for years bust like a dam over you. It should not be surprising that suddenly there are now new self-injurious behaviors that weren't there previously. These are the things that happen with trauma. We're going to bring up the neurotypical kid suffers child abuse. Example again. Because even though how we experience and manifest the reaction of dealing with that trauma differently, we do still both, it's the similar experience. Some folks, I'm not saying every folks, and I'm definitely not casting an eye of judgment here at all, who come out of those situations may act out in ways that they know damn good and well are destructive. They get deep into hardcore drugs, or they pull a me and decide to become a raging alcoholic. Some begin to cut themselves. Some, I was one of these people too, will actually completely and utterly isolate ourselves entirely from the outside world. That's something that both neurotypical survivors and neurodivergent survivors actually both do in regards to similar types of situations, even if we were never known previously to do them. Because literally, that level of stress, going through that trauma, it changes your very brain chemistry. How could it not? How could it not? Right? So, in the situation in regards to RM, losing weight, exhibiting behaviors that he did not have previously. As a person who is trauma informed and a survivor of trauma, I can tell you that is again right on cue as to what is actually causing the regression as opposed to the absolute monstrous load of bullshit that JRC is trying to sell you. These are the reactions of somebody who's lived through horrific trauma, abuse, and torture. And by the way, the fact that they survived it when they did, when I survived it when I did, those very formative teenage years, yeah, that has an effect. It's going to continue to have an effect into our adulthood, our relationships with other people, interacting with our community, the world, even our jobs. Okay? So, no, JRC. In regards to this new behavior you're mentioning, the fact that he lost weight, the fact that SIB and AB went up is not remotely surprising at all for anyone who's either gone through or work with individuals who are survivors of abuse. And particularly, I can say that because I'm both. I've worked with many individuals, neurodivergent like myself, who have survived those types of things within that age range. And I was the teenager who survived and went through those things and suddenly had behaviors, started doing things, saying things. If I were to take you guys back to before I was 16, no, even 18, 19, Goody Two Shoes didn't even begin to cover it. Didn't even begin to cover it. Okay? I did not curse. I did not smoke. I did not drink. I did not date. Yeah. Yeah. I was very much a nerd. That's prevalent no matter what's going on. I was very into evangelicalism. Out of all the trauma from adulthood to when I was younger, the only after effect that I am actually quite happy with was being finally removed from the evangelical bubble. Because on the outside looking in, it looks like a death cult. Sorry, not sorry. It looks like a death cult. That's a different subject entirely. But you get my point. I was very well behaved. I did not curse. I did not backtalk. I did whatever chores were told to me that I needed to do when I was told to do them without any form of argument whatsoever. Okay? Then as I got older and I experienced more trauma, but let's just say I have a mouth on me these days that would even make drill sergeants shake their heads. Right? The drinking, I never did that before. I was never a big drinker. Maybe had a glass of wine on my 21st birthday. Kept one glass of wine a night because I was told it would help me with my leg spasms until right after my dad died, and I went right down the rabbit hole. This is normal for those of us who go through trauma. In the case of autistics, unfortunately, we go through what I like to call repeated trauma. Many of us go through it in our youth when we're kids. And a lot of us get gaslit into very bad relationships with the worst human beings possible. And then there's more trauma. and more changing, and more things that I never did previously that I do now. You get the picture. Now, in all those changes, and the behaviors that became more intense and worse until things settled down, the new behaviors that I never exhibited before, neurotypical child the same. These are trauma responses. The worst thing you can do on planet Earth is respond to a trauma response by inflicting more trauma. Okay? It's just gonna make it worse. It's just gonna make it worse and that much more dangerous. Okay? This situation didn't happen because they were moved from the JRC at the proper age, because that is protocol. When you hit transition age, you transition over into adult services. These behaviors appeared and got worse because the JRC just spent multiple years making this poor kid's life a living fucking nightmare. For years and years and years, with no one even trying to intervene on their behalf. This is the fallout. The JRC is what caused this behavior to manifest due to the trauma they inflicted on the kid. But they didn't do that with an auditive device. And around we go in this asinine, completely, utterly stupid circle with the JRC. The answer to the trauma response should never be to inflict more trauma so we can scare them into compliance, because around and around and around and around again, it's a different kind of a cycle of abuse. You deal with someone who's neurodivergent, who survived horrific trauma, by bringing someone onto their team who is a trauma-informed expert and get them integrated into the rest of the team and help them get familiar with the treatment program and protocols so that everybody is a part of a team, are working together, and can speak with each other. Because, folks, that's what I have. That's what I have. And because of it, although, yes, I will probably these days curse like a sailor and look at the world through very jaded eyes, and probably have very quite a few issues with trust for the rest of my life. But because it was dealt with properly, and I was able to get that support I needed to help deal with those years of trauma, anger, pain, and self-loathing. And because the people who were working for me for the autism, for the anxiety disorder, their constant communication all the time, everybody comparing notes. To put it bleakly, if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't have made it to my 40th birthday. So, JRC, my answer to this challenge is these new behaviors, why it got worse. You abused that poor kid for years. When they finally got to a safe space, they did not have the energy to hold up the facade anymore, and the dam bust. Just like myself, when that dam busted, they regressed in a few life skills. Due to the psychological fallout of the dam busting, there are going to be new behaviors that were never there previously that are now, as well as the behaviors that they were trying to suppress coming out and becoming more frequent because it's beyond the point of exhaustion. They just don't have it to suppress and repress it anymore. And there is a toll. Okay? There is a common sense, logical answer in regards to how this should have been taken care of. And no, that does not mean sending poor RM back to the JRC so that they can force him a mask again and inflict more trauma on him. It is we've got to get these departments starting to talk to each other. And it shouldn't have to be us bullheaded, stubborn, loud, and opinionated autistics like moi that help guide you all to take those steps. You, as people who work in the service field, should automatically know if these signs pop up, then someone is going to need to be put on the team that is deeply experienced in exactly those type of manners so that they can educate the rest of the team, and then everybody works together so they can at least try to soften a little bit the fallout that comes from processing and dealing with all that trauma. I know I'm using that word a lot, but that's because the JRC has a tendency to pretend like it doesn't exist, or that they could possibly be at fault as the people who caused it. We're going to go ahead and close on that one, folks, but in regards to lost weight, when I have psychological, like deep PTSD, those kind of issues, no, I'm not hungry. I don't even think to eat because I'm too busy being overwhelmed over way too many things that to process at once. So that didn't surprise me either. Now we're going to go ahead and close it out, folks. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few we do tend to get removed from time to time, so please, folks, don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe. Please don't forget to utilize the comments. Appreciate your time. As always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. I'm going to see you here in a moment after I come back from checking the mail. Bye-bye, everyone.